Well, welcome everyone to our closing ceremony focused on next steps in ensuring progress between the UN and civil society. Although I feel like I should broaden the concept of civil society to other actors in society, because we're not just going to be focusing on the non-profits that we've been spending a lot of the day. It's also, of course, about the private sector and other sectors really that are impactful to our work. We have three fantastic speakers today, and I'd just like to introduce them in turn before we get to our discussion, which, as usual, we will have opening speeches and then a few questions from the audience. So to start with, Angus Rennie is the Chief of Staff Interim at the UN Global Compact. He's passionate about bringing the United Nations and business together to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and to leave the planet in a better shape for future generations. Throughout his career, he's worked to create impact as a writer, a strategist, a relationship builder, and as someone who speaks truth to power. This has included his work as a political advisor and as a Canadian lawyer, and more recently, as he speaks to us now, a career in service of the United Nations, advocating for a more responsible, ethical, and principled business practices. Joining us too, and with many thanks for a rather last-minute replacement for Matic, one of our speakers, is Tjaša Tanko, who is a diplomat at the Permanent Mission of Slovenia United Nations. She has been a diplomat with the Slovenian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, also in Copenhagen, and in DC, and indeed having worked in Ljubljana as well. And we're very happy to have Slovenia represented, who's of course one of the current members, non-permanent members of the UN Security Council, and one of our supporting partners. And last but by no means least, you heard her from earlier. We're very happy to bring back, as it were, Mojgan, who is the Baha'I International Community Youth Delegate to the United Nations. So she's also working with the civil society youth representation on the UN GDC, and her advocacy and volunteer work outside the Baha'I International Community includes involvement with junior youth empowerment programs, and as facilitators help to strengthen the intellectual and moral capacity of 12 to 15-year-olds in her neighborhood. So she's indeed one of the stars, I would say, of the UN youth work that we're very happy to host today. So as we look towards the end of anything, of a busy day where we've been discussing Model UN as both a sort of youth capacity building project, but also as a good example of youth-led civil society, we were really interested in hearing a bit more about how can we make sure that any progress made is both sustainable and indeed is a foundation to further and further progress. There is an issue at times that we're always reinventing the wheel. So how do we make sure that, especially amongst Model UN, but also more broadly within these communities, that there's progress made? And what would you like to see more from youth-led civil society and organizations that would be more impactful or that you notice is lacking in your current work? So I'd like to give the floor over to Angus, and thank you very much again for joining us.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. How close do I need to get to the microphone? Yeah, great. Well, lovely to be here. Thanks for the invitation. It was good to just catch your wrap up of some of your discussion, and what struck me about just the little resume of the conversations that you were having was how timely and relevant it seems to be what you're discussing in terms of what the UN is working on right now. A bit about me, as Philippe said, I'm a Canadian lawyer by background, worked in politics, but did my share of Model UN a long time ago. I shall not disclose how long ago. And one of the things that truly, I think, delighted and surprised me was when I found my way into a career as an international public servant working in service of the UN. I was delighted and surprised, but delighted as to how similar it felt to Model UN, how the real thing actually kind of felt like what I had done, you know, in high school and in college, and it speaks to comments that you were making, I think, about the incredibly enriching skill building opportunity that you get that you don't get in a poli-sci class or an IR class, that you kind of just have to do it and practice it and develop you know, those relationship building and communication skills that the real life kind of work fundamentally requires. And so just to validate the time and effort that you all put into this, because if you are interested in a career in diplomacy or international public service or public interest work in global affairs, I think you'll find that you know, sooner or later, a lot of the experience that you have in the Model UN Fora does really come to bear fruit. So keep up the good work, I guess is my one message for you. I do come at this from a slightly different angle, as Philippe mentioned. Civil society in its most expansive includes the private sector and business stakeholders. And I work for the UN Global Compact, which is the UN's main initiative for engaging with the private sector. We were born almost 25 years ago at the World Economic Forum, when the Secretary General at the time, Kofi Annan, was recognizing that there was a lot of tension arising from the rapid globalization of our world and changes in kind of the global marketplace that had profound impacts on communities, societies, governments around the world. And he issued a challenge in Davos to the business leaders that were assembled there to form a compact with the United Nations to put a human face on the global market, were his famous words at the time. And really generated quite a response from business leaders who were assembled, who said, yes, we want to work with you. We recognize that that the private sector is absolutely needs to be invested in reinforcing global peace and security and advancing development. And a lot of the fundamental goals of the UN are really shared by business, because businesses can't thrive in societies that are not thriving. And so if you fast forward to 2024, we have over 20,000 companies around the world who work with us, the Global Compact Initiative, who sign a commitment at the highest level. Their CEOs commit to the Secretary General to support the UN Global Compact and the 10 principles that are the guiding framework of our initiative, that cover everything from human rights, labor issues, environment and climate action, and anti-corruption. And then more recently, supporting the SDGs, which were born after the birth of the Global Compact. So we work with companies in many different countries around the world. We have local country-based chapters that are business-led initiatives that work with the UN Global Compact to make our work relevant in local marketplaces and to partner with other stakeholders, civil society, government, UN, to try to figure out how we can challenge and engage the private sector so that it's mobilizing its resources and it's altering its business models, and it is making its investment decisions based on those fundamental goals that we all share, and most recently as articulated in the SDGs. And I think enlightened business leaders realize that relationship with the UN and that partnership and that commitment to doing business responsibly and sustainably is not just in a moral imperative, it's actually just fundamentally good for business. And that businesses that commit to doing business responsibly in alignment with the values of the UN in the long term tend to succeed, tend to outperform those companies that haven't really integrated sustainability into their core values and ways of doing business. We've also seen a really profound shift in the world of finance to recognize that sustainability is core to business success, and to factor that into the way investors are looking at where to put their money. And that really has also helped create a market shift that is continuing. So we're a growing initiative. We're fundamentally a partnership initiative. Civil society is really important to us as well, because we need to challenge business. I mean, 20,000 businesses, it sounds great, but there are millions of enterprises around the world, and we need to see a sea change in the way business does business if we're really going to achieve the SDGs. It sounds like the private sector has come up in some of your conversations, which is great. And our office is really working to make sure that we are part of the conversation and that we're part of the solution. And I understand you were talking about the Summit of the Future. We're also engaged in efforts to support that and make sure that businesses at the table, really as part of the Secretary General's vision for inclusive and networked multilateralism. So a multilateralism that really engages and challenges and involves all parts of society, including youth. And I think it's been an honor to work in the UN under the leadership of Antonio Guterres, because there has been such an emphasis on doing better when it comes to engaging youth. You know, the creation of the Office of Youth Affairs is a very significant development that I think really signals that it matters, certainly to him as the Secretary General, but to the UN and to member states that have been very supportive of that effort to make sure that we're bringing youth into the conversation. For us at the Global Compact, we also do that in a few ways that are very unique to business. We have a sister initiative called PRIME, Principles for Responsible Management Education. So for those of you who are thinking about business school or career in management, encourage you to look at PRIME, because we're recognizing that we need to equip future leaders in the private sector to understand and sort of make sustainability a core element of their training, skills, orientation, so that we can continue to advance that transformation we need to see in the private sector. We also work with young entrepreneurs who are in the workforce, who are working in companies who are part of the UN Global Compact, recognizing that a lot of the changes we need to see often can come from, you know, young workers who have new ideas, new energy, fresh perspectives, and innovative approaches to things. So we have an initiative called the SDG Innovation Accelerator, where we ask companies to identify young employees who can work with us to help design innovations within their business that help address the SDGs. So these are kind of some of the ways that we, from a business lens, think about being more inclusive and engaging of younger generations. But the summit and the Pact of the Future, I think, are really important. Obviously, we're halfway through the journey to 2030 to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, and we're halfway through, but we're not nearly halfway done. And it's quite worrying in an era of poly-crisis. You know, where do we even begin in terms of some of the challenges we face globally? To really think through, you know, what has changed since 2015, when all of the member states arrived at this, I would say, almost miraculous consensus about what our priorities would be for global development, sustainable development. And you fast forward to today, and we're just facing so many challenges that were not on the radar at that time. So we have the what. We know what we need to do. The SDGs are really just so fundamental as our guiding star, but the how needs to be rethought. And I think we're really hopeful that coming out of the summit in September, the Pact of the Future, with a common agenda as a roadmap, that we can think through some of these new ways of working, new, more inclusive ways of working, and that we'll have youth at the table, I think, for that effort. You know, everything from the Bretton Woods system that no longer really serves the needs of global development, to the Global Digital Compact. You know, it was interesting to hear just some discussion around digital platforms and tools, and you know, just the rapid pace of change in the way we work, the way we communicate, the way we interact, the way we receive news, the way we perceive things to be true or not to be true, how we mobilize, how we vote. You know, so many things. Can we access information online? So the global digital compact will hopefully be a really critical tool to take us into the current century. You know, science, technology, looking at future generations, building on that youth office, really kind of baking into the way we make decisions, that formal obligation to future generations, which is something that I think is also a really exciting development that we've got to think as policymakers, as decision makers, about not just current youth generations, but future generations. And just overall, kind of hopefully a refresh, a re-energization of global governance and multilateralism. And there are lots of opportunities to get engaged. There will be a weekend of programming that's multi-stakeholder at the UN that civil society is going to be critical to having involved. And last year we had the SDG Summit, and it was very open. There were lots of opportunities to come and be part of the weekend program. So I would encourage you, if you're interested in the space, to just watch this space. And the September 16th, 17th, 18th, you know, will be a lot of opportunity, very inclusive, for being part of the conversation as we look to the future. So yeah, the world is a troubled place, but we need the energy and commitment and enthusiasm of everyone in this room. And I'm hopeful that we are also kind of on on the precipice of, or on the verge of, a really exciting kind of new path forward that will crystallize in September. So just a few thoughts from my side.
Thanks very much, Angus. Tjaša?
Yes.
Please, thank you.
Thank you very much. I won't be as long, trust me. No, just because I'm a last minute replacement for my colleague who is doing more digital things, and where the civil society and NGOs and the youth are actually more important, because once you're talking new technologies and everything, us older people tend to kind of have a little bit of a have a lack sometimes of moving with the times. My name is Tjaša. I'm actually the sanctions coordinator and the counterterrorism expert at the mission. I'm an international lawyer. I've been at the ministry for a while now. And I've done a very, very different things. You build a very unique skill set in this kind of thing. So what I wanted to share, so I have some talking points on like general like cooperation with civil society, which I can tell you that Slovenia EU is very pushing forward to multi-stakeholder approach to everything, to consult, exchange with civil society. That is not always the appetite of all the states. So sometimes even that part has to be fought for within the UN to get the civil society involved, because I think there is more space for that in Geneva, just because of the mandates of the organizations there are more connected, and here it's more securitized. It's more peace and security, and the civil society has nothing to do here, and it's an intergovernmental approaches. So those are the kind of narratives that we are still fighting, also in New York, and hopefully successfully, but it's also as Angus said, we need the business, we need the youth, we need the NGOs, we need the civil society, because they are the ones who can tell us how our little theoretical negotiations translate onto the ground. Like I can negotiate guiding principles on countering terrorist financing, but it's the NGOs that are going to tell me, because of that we might have this obstacle, that obstacle in just providing the humanitarian aid, or these rules can be abused in these ways. So when I'm going into my next session, I am aware of where the traps are. So getting this information from the ground is really important. And that's why we always advocate to try and talk to the civil society, to the youth, to everybody, in order to get the picture, in order to get something onto the paper that is going to work in practice without being too limiting or without being abused. So those are the kind of very practical things. And I know everybody's like progress, but sometimes we have to fight to keep what's there. So those are the kind of like the backgrounds, and a lot of civil society is very disappointed. Oh, we didn't achieve that and we didn't achieve this. But in the end, we're like, the achievement is it's still there. So that is the achievement. And there's a lot of fighting in the back rooms that nobody actually knows about. But those are the kind of things that you actually have to realize as well. So sometimes just keeping things in the documents, keeping like the wide engagement, this is all fought for every single time. Every time the document is opened, every time a resolution is being renewed, we're still fighting the same fight. So those are the kind of small things that you don't learn either, I think, in class. As civil society or like NGOs tend to be more advocacy prone, but they want us to move forward, and sometimes they're really, really disappointed with like no movement. but for us it's clear, oh, we've defended it. So those are the small things that you learn once you start being in these negotiation rooms, that is really, really important as well. So I can also say I was there when it was the Office of the Youth Representative was kind of being negotiated, and we're very happy that it has been like this role has been institutionalized, because then you can start working further, like you're in there, so now it's just moving it forward as much as we can. So this is going to be, I think, like a good stepping stone for the future in order to get the youth involved into more institutional versions of this. So thank you.
Definitely. I just want to say, and there's something that I think earlier was mentioned regarding the Summit of the Future. Zero draft, quite ambitious text on meaningful youth engagement, which is going to be a struggle to keep. We're going to try and do that, and
With edits right now.
with edits, just of edits.
Just with edits.
Okay. Well, Ishan's already left, but we wish him the best. You know, I'm sure he's got a lot of work ahead of him. Well, good luck is all I say. Thank you. And last but not least, Mojgan, please.
Yes, thank you so much. Can everybody hear me? Okay. So I'm going to keep it brief. I'm always happy to keep it brief. I know we're over time. But as we kind of wrap up today, I kind of want to say something. It's going to sound very cheesy, but I don't want you all to underestimate the power that you have to make change within your own communities. So being part of the UN system for about 3 years now, I have noticed that the UN has a tendency to focus on numbers and quantitative measures, and it's all about the big numbers. You know, for example, we fed this many people, or we have this many women enrolled, and these are all important. And don't get me wrong, it's important to have these metrics, but it's not the only way to measure change. So often I found that the changes that make the most meaningful impact are more qualitative. So it's on the local level. It's about a small process that takes place within a community or a village. And it can be difficult to remember this because I think that we've all been wired in a way to think about, you know, big numbers or big institutions translates to big change. So I think this is a dichotomy that we have when we speak about UN civil society collaboration specifically, is where can change truly take place? And to me, it starts at the schools, it starts within the homes, at your dinner tables. It's kind of those small stories of local change that are often untold or forgotten. And I think the next question is, how do we get the UN to internalize this in a way that is meaningful? So for example, right now, by creating spaces such as these, to kind of harness this knowledge that we all have that is available at the local grassroots level, and then sharing it at the international level, I think that's one way we can kind of offer suggestions to the UN and to implement a different model of learning for collaboration. And I also wanted to recognize that there's no, one size fits all solution. I think that we all know that. We all face different challenges, and each community is unique with its own set of circumstances, culture, and resources. And so I think embracing this diversity allows us to use approaches that we may not find apparent when we're just focusing on numbers or quantitative measures. So I think we all know, like, there's a need for broader engagement and partnership, and we need to bridge that gap between UN and civil society. And it's important, as I mentioned, to include the lived experiences and stories and the different perspectives of all of us, not just the few that have the privilege and access to go to the UN. So yeah, this is just very brief, but I wanted to just thank you all. I had a lot of fun in the workshops, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you afterwards. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So I did want to take any questions from the audience. I have a final question, which I always like to end panels, discussions with a positive. So if there are any questions here, is there one over here? Okay, fantastic. Is any of my colleagues available to, well, if you want to pass the microphone. Yeah, thank you, Bill. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So I had a question about the UN Global Compact, which I'm not very familiar with. And broadly, it's that, well, I guess I was reminded of the tragedy of the Commons thought experiment, where if you graze your sheep and everyone wants to graze their sheep as much as possible, but then if everyone grazes their sheep, the grass dies or something like that. I think I butchered my explanation here, but it's sort of in a sort of like a free market economy where the private sector operates. You tend to have certain what is it, like certain competitive advantages by not necessarily being sustainable in a few respects. So what would you say, I think this question is most for Angus, but what would you say were some of the bigger challenges in communicating with companies? And with the creation of new companies, it's probably not as difficult because they were created around the main idea already, but with communicating with existing companies around creating protocols that address the SDGs.
Nice and easy question there. Yeah, there are a lot of layers to that. I think fundamentally, business people need to see a compelling business case. Of course, you can make a moral case, but there are different levers and kind of pressure points that can help create the transformations that we need. Because fundamentally, if businesses continue to operate kind of in a status quo way, we've already pushed beyond our planetary boundaries, right? So it's pretty key. So you can't make money on a dead planet. The top line argument is there. If someone will take a little bit of a step back from their quarterly returns and think slightly longer term, it's usually fairly evident that you need to be dynamic and innovative and stay on top of trends, and the private sector tends to lean into foresight and trying to think about kind of what's coming, and frankly, just kind of planetary dynamics right now lend itself to a company thinking, all right, well, I've got to be resilient. I've got to future-proof my business, and to future-proof your business, you need to think about all kinds of things. Climate change being just one of them now. Biodiversity being another example of something that we weren't thinking. Everyone was thinking about sort of carbon footprint, climate, but with mass extinction of species, that has a pretty profound impact on global supply chains. And so, yes, I mean, there's, I guess, in some ways, maybe some advantage to just kind of neglecting that in the very, very short term, but the timelines in terms of risk are now getting much more immediate and short term. So I think we find it's fairly compelling. The case makes itself to some extent, but also there are other levers and pressure points, and that's where civil society comes in. Whether it's consumers, youth activists, pressuring companies to do the right thing, and also engaging in dialogue, public-private dialogue, multi-stakeholder dialogue with government, so that we set the right kinds of smart regulations, because we feel that the best way to transform the private sector is through we say a smart mix of voluntary measures and regulatory change, and working with governments to figure out what's the right balance there, as well as can we harmonize. There's a lot of expectations on business to disclose their carbon footprint, social impact, etc. But there are all kinds of different frameworks for that. So one thing that we're trying to do with different partners is to try to bring some harmonization to what are we asking for from business. But it's sort of an all hands on deck approach that's needed. We can't continue the way we are, though. It's just not an option.
Thank you very much. And for my final question, which I hope we can keep it relatively short, and I'll just go down here. Very simply, what are you most looking forward to in the upcoming year when it comes to international engagement, whether that be at the UN, whether that be through other sort of multinational items you're working on? But I always like to leave on a bit of a positive note, on hope, as it were. Not that we were necessarily unhopeful across the day, but with that, maybe, Tjaša, I don't know if you wanted to, anything that comes to mind in particular. What are you most hopeful for in the upcoming year?
It's a hard question, actually, because my main files are on Security Council, and the world is just on fire. But I think I'm hoping for the Summit of the Future to be successful and kind of steer the UN in the right way to kind of go back to being the organization it's supposed to be, also in the peace and security like area, because right now it's mostly human rights, humanitarian aid kind of. Security Council is kind of like, we're trying, but the success still depends on the P5, and sometimes it's just not an option to go forward with certain things. So I'm just hoping this kind of like, I'm not saying in the next 1 year, but like to get back on track, to have this as a forum to deal with any kind of conflict or any kind of in a peaceful way. Like we can agree to disagree, like just within limits. So
Thank you very much. A true revitalization, as it were, of the UN.
Precisely.
Thank you. Mojgan?
Yes, so I'm looking forward to the Summit of the Future process. I think we all are. Some of the outcomes of that, also closer than Summit of the Future, is the Nairobi Conference, Civil Society, and the UNDGC Steering Committee is really working on ways to involve youth in the planning process. So it's not just an afterthought where, okay, young people are here, tell us what you think, but to actually be implemented into the program. And then, I think also the UN Youth Office, just continuing to see what comes out of that. I think it's a very exciting time for young people.
Indeed. And last but by no means least.
Yeah, I would echo that hope and excitement about September, and hopefully a pact of the future that is a great roadmap, gives us sort of a new, refreshed how. We know what we need to do, but there have been so many changes in the world since 2015, let alone since the UN was founded. So hopefully we'll get to a point where there will be some good constructive alignment among member states, and definitely eager to see that good outcome.
Well, thank you very much. Please all join me in a small round of applause for our speakers. Thank you very much for joining us at the end of a very long day. We now just have one small video from one of our closest supporting partners, Wisemee, and then just a few words from ourselves. We will get straight into the small introductions for the networking drinks, and then we can go drink and socialize. So thank you all.
So, are there any points or motions on the floor?
I have a motion. Daniel motions for a consultation of the whole of 4 minutes on the topic of securing Model UN's legacy within the international system. I'm in favor.
I don't think you can ever do that.
So I'll tell you how you could. If you had an MUN committee where people sit in the room, but they don't vote on, being present, but they're still there for quorum. Everyone abstains one, and then the one person votes in favor, and that's sufficient if enough people are in the room. Bam.
If anyone ever does that, please make sure to record it. And then you are also going to secure your MUN legacy. In order for it to be done right, it needs to actually be in an MUN conference.
Exactly.
So,
like at an MUN conference, you would need to have the room full of that. Like, because the question is, when can one person be 50% plus one? Because if it's a tie, it's a tie. And if it's an odd number, it's usually, let's say, 3 or more. So it makes sense. Here, if David's the chair and I'm the delegate and I raise the motion, so technically, I can't second my own motion, nor can I object to it. So
I know that's where I got.
Don't even reach the
Okay,
point.
I got stuck right over there. It kind of leads us right back into the importance of WISE and how we see education in MUN.
That's true, because where else will you find people to talk about the specifics of how one person can vote a majority? But that's it. Like, you can't offer the motion, you can't second and object yourself.
We should actually have an upcoming blog post just about how we can have a committee of one and what those rules may look like.
Of course, that would be pretty funny. Why Wisemee sees education on Model UN is important in our 4 minutes, which we've used a minute and a half of with that introduction. We want to talk about 3 things here. As the co-founders of Wisemee, we took years of us doing Model UN to understand that there were formulas and systems and ways to navigate within this huge, very versatile and amorphous, entity, which really can change your life. And so to answer why Wisemee sees education on MUN is important, first of our 3 things to talk about, I would say it's the Model UN is the absolute best skill builder you can have today, in the age of AI, and where like your lines won't necessarily be written for you, but you still have to perform them. And that is what is going to distinguish you so much more than words you may memorize, like never before.
We are going into a new future that has never been lived before. The knowledge of what to say is there at your fingertips. AI, ChatGPT might give you the best speech, technically, in MUN. It's how do we deliver it and how do we connect as humans with one another? That's going to be one of the most valuable resources and skills to learn moving forward. And that's why I agree with you 100%, Daniel. It's the skill you're learning in MUN and that we keep on training is about, I like that. It's not about the exact best line to say, the best speech or the best paper or the best, resolution. And that is going to be a lot more important moving forward. Everyone's going to have a technically good speech.
Yeah. That's although I will add and say at least the moment most of the generative AI does not give you a perfect CIA opening speech. You still need to give generalizations, but like for a real good policy speech, you're still gonna have to write it. For now.
Correct. Not perfect. And
yeah, check out wisemee.com, our AI chatbot who will help you learn how to write a position paper better.
Yeah. In addition to that, what we're going to be doing moving forward with this conference, MUN Summit, is hosting all of the historic conferences and have, all of the videos in one place to continue educating and giving a one source to revisit what happened in years prior and how MUN has evolved. We do see that evolution each and every year. It's amazing.
It is.
What do you hope that the future of MUN holds?
I mean, I would say that MUN works incredibly well, usually separate from any administrative or governmental organization. It's like no one owns basketball. Anyone can do it. No one owns Model UN. Like, we have a debate about the UN, but most of Model UN is very separate from the UN. And I feel that the people that it helps shape are some of the best ambassadors, some of the most proactive individuals. Like someone who's done Model UN for 3 years has, I would say, life skills that really are comparable and beyond what some people pay a lot of money for and aren't able to get once you're past that place of learning. So I feel if Model UN can be recognized by municipalities, by governments, forget about the foreign service, just these departments going, oh, wow, this trained someone really well, and not wait for someone to apply and see it on their CV. Actually, the opposite, that people will recognize the Model UN as in some ways like the best gym for the personality and the person.
I like that analogy, the best gym for the personality of the person. And the big difference, if we connect the future of MUN and AI, if you walked into a gym a few years ago, maybe you didn't know exactly what to do and how to build big muscles. And now everyone at their fingertips has, an AI trainer. You can ask any type of question, build out the perfect program. You don't have to worry about that fundamental building blocks of building out that program. And you can have that custom program. All you have to do is show up and continue practicing it. Same thing goes over here. It makes MUN and the training of MUN more accessible for all on, having the right, not even right speech, but the right formula of how to build out an MUN. It doesn't matter if it's a club or if it's researching for your paper and being able to focus on the fundamentals. The fundamentals in my eyes is how do you build that interpersonal skill and less about the technicality? Because when we teach MUN, one of the biggest fears people have in joining is, what's this preambulatory? Why do I need to learn?
What's all this reading?
Big words?
So much tech.
And what is the structure of a position paper or a resolution? And why does it have to start in certain ways? And people can stop worrying about that, because we're going to have tools to make sure that the technicalities are there done for us. And we're going to see a lot more of that, not only in the world, but in MUN. I know we've got a few things cooking up, on our website on just putting the ideas and come out with either the speech or the position paper. But the ideas are still the key elements that need to be placed in. And you need to be able to stand behind your ideas throughout your whole MUN journey.
Exactly. Very much agree. Stand by your days in the committee sessions, in the world between conferences, those times where you wait for the next event to happen. And I think it's really, really great to watch the growth of the MUN Summit. It's really becoming part of the MUN landscape, the opportunity to really meet thinkers from the field. We always hear people did Model UN since, the 1940s, but the chance to, engage with our community outside of our circuit, a place to do that. So great job to the organizers. We're very, very happy to be partners in helping build this and bring it to the world.
Yeah. And as Daniel said, this was supposed to be a 4-minute video, so feel free to watch it at 2.0. You guys next year.
It was feel free to watch it at 2.0, 2 times speed. That was already at 1.25 speed. So we did. I'm extremely thankful because the original cut of it was longer. But nevertheless, I genuinely huge thanks to Daniel and David and whoever's vacuuming in the corridor, because they have been really, really supportive from the very beginning, as has a very certain gentleman. Although actually I lie. Bill and I were not always the supportive couple of MUNers that we are now. I must admit, we originally got, I'd say, in an academic dispute, is what I want to say, at the very beginning, the origins of Model UN. But we got over that because I think we discovered a shared passion and a shared love for Model UN, its values, and what it means for not just everyone in this room, but for society, really. I think we believe it's made a big impact. It's hard to measure, but that's something that we want to put the summit together to start opening that conversation about what can MUN be? What is the top and the most importance that it can bring to the world? And to me, this day has been a complete success, just from the fact that it happened alone. This really wasn't a one-person thing. I have a list of thanks I will do afterwards, but first I do want to give it to Bill, who's been almost a mentor to me in this MUN world, post-MUN conference world, as it were. So please, a small round of applause to Bill Yotive.
Thank you very much. I first want to start off by thanking Philippe and MUNers Across Borders. As I said at the opening, the idea for the summit was Philippe, and he's the one that deserves all the credit for this, so please give him a round of applause. And all the staff from MUNers Across Borders have been absolutely fabulous, and they deserve a round of applause as well. And all of you for sticking here through thick and thin, through everything. You should give yourselves applause as well. I have to say the day has met my expectations for what I had hoped the summit would accomplish. I thought the discussion was fruitful, and it actually gave me a lot of food for thought when I leave here. I hope that you leave this summit with the same feeling. I hope you leave with new ideas, new things to consider, ideas about how to meet the challenges that you face that we've talked about today. There's one area that I think was left out today that I would just like to conclude with. We talked a lot about accessibility, and there's one area of accessibility that I think that we need to talk about that was not mentioned at all. One of the issues that I've found in organizing Model UNs around the world is access to youth from Africa. I find that they, of all the different regions of the world, face more barriers than most of us. They often have difficulty getting visas to countries where there are Model UN conferences. They often face financial barriers that are higher than most of us. And I think we need to talk more. If we want this to be inclusive and accessible, we need to be thinking about how to make this more accessible to students from Africa. And I just want to bring that up because that's not something that we mentioned at all today. And I find that we talk about gaps, that's a huge gap that I think we really need to address. So I close with that, and also that it's been really wonderful meeting all of you today, and I hope that we stay in touch. I hope that this is the beginning for future dialogue, and that you also find that you found some ways today, information that allow you to enter and participate more in the process, and that you also have a voice in what is going on in the world. Thank you very much.
And now the list of people to thank, because it is a long list. Firstly, I would say someone who you haven't seen, but she's been behind the scenes for almost all of this for the whole day, has been setting up the online items. That is Lojane Al-Taib, who's joining us online. So none of you, I think, have seen her, but really, she is possibly the MVP for this. And I know she's seeing through the screen there. And I know she's embarrassed that I'm thanking her. She's a very humble person, but she really deserves all the love and thanks. Otherwise, throughout here, Tarek has been part of the logistics team. I'm just going to go through the list now. So Tarek, who is helping setting up there, Noor, who's been here for our workshops, Tasha, who's also been behind the scenes, Mir Irene, Hussein, Sharon, who you'll hear more from in a very short moment, Joanna, Emre, who you've seen with our cameras throughout the whole day, Talia, Fraser, Shay, Jordan, Barak, Maria, Nesma, Masi, Sarah, Ahmed, Alimat, Sumya, Captain Sarah Smith, Alexander, and Anna Maria. This team has been around 20 strong for about a year now. We've gone on, we've gone off, all of us either having full-time jobs and volunteering on the side, or some of us still studying. So it has been a lot, but we're really proud to have brought you this event today. And outside of MUNers Across Borders, there's another very special person who, again, you haven't seen today, but we will happily see him soon. And that is Edmund's Michael Eaton, for which really none of this would be possible. The rooms, the support, the help, the love as well has been very important. So Michael, I hope you do get to see this recording as well. I will see you soon. Thank you. But he's very important, as are all the rest of the Edmund team we've had today, and that's Chase, Caitlin, and Anna. Otherwise, from WFUNA, it's not just been Bill as well, although a huge thanks to him. Thanks also to Finn, indeed, Finn Carlson and the rest of the WFUNA team, both in New York and Geneva, who've been a really big help to this organization. And as for our sponsors, so of course, we're very thankful to the Portuguese delegation, who is also over there. The Polish delegation, which is the lanyards. Many people came up to me asking why we have Polish lanyards. They are the reason why. And the material at the back of the room, we have a lot of literature available. The Jamaican delegation, and of course, the ambassador for joining us at the beginning, and the Slovenian delegation, and of course, their last speaker. So 4 nations, 3 regions of United Nations represented. And the rest of our partners, that's NMUN, that's MMUN, Maiman and Mun Command, UNA USA, Wisemee, UCMUN, IDIA, the MUN Alumni Association, the Arab Open University of Egypt, Izamun, Global Minds LLC, John Hopkins MUN, MUN Erfurt, MUNUSAL, and Suez Canal University MUN. That's been my 50 people to thank. Now, we have one more sort of set of speeches to give, but let me just already now say a huge and unreserved thank you for joining us for the first in-person Model UN Summit, but certainly not the last. So cheers to you.